The enemy came before sunrise, when a night still clung to the sky and the camp lay half asleep. The first missile struck at 4 in the morning, a shrieking roar tearing through the silence, slamming into the communications tower. The ground heaved and the air split apart. A fountain of fire shot upward, painting the pre-dawn horizon with a burning column that turned darkness into a false dawn of smoke and flame. Emma Carter, a young lieutenant and field medic, had been in the medical bay when the world fell apart. She was counting surgical packs, noting missing syringes, muttering under her breath about how supplies never matched inventory. When a blast hurled her across the room, glass shattered around her, and the metal cabinet slammed against her shoulder. The concussion rattled her chest and left her ears ringing like church bells struck too hard. She blinked and staggered to her feet. Blood trickled down from a shallow cut above her brow. The smell of burning insulation already filled the corridors. The base alarm wailed in strangled tones, a mechanical voice declaring all personnel to battle stations. But before the message could finish, another missile landed, this time smashing into the command center, the heart of the base, and with it the duty officers and any hope of coordinated defense. Emma gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. Her training whispered in her mind, "Do not freeze. Assess. Act." She pushed fear aside and stepped into the hallway. The lights flickered. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Outside, she could hear the distinctive whistle of artillery cutting the sky, each sound followed by bone-shaking thunder, then the cries of men scrambling for cover. The third missile struck the barracks, and Emma felt the concussion roll through the medical bay. Windows bowed inward. A shelf of instruments clattered to the floor, and somewhere in the distance a scream was cut short. The main power grid failed, and the building sank into eerie emergency lighting. Shadows flickered across broken walls. Every corner looked like a grave. The door burst open, and the first wounded stumbled in, a soldier with his uniform shredded, blood running down his side where shrapnel had torn through. Behind him, 2 more half carried another man who was limp, head hanging, crimson soaking his bandage. Emma's body moved before her mind caught up. Get him on the table, apply pressure, gauze, bandage, keep him alive, keep him breathing. More came, one after another, some walking and moaning, others carried by desperate comrades. The medical bay turned into a war zone of its own. Explosions outside, collapsing walls inside. Emma ordered hands to press on wounds, ordered makeshift splints, ordered pain relief from whatever was not broken or burned. Every second counted, and every second another shell landed somewhere above. Corporal Jackson, a radio operator with a bloodied arm, rushed in with wide eyes. "Ma'am, the whole base is burning. Command post gone, fire control gone. We may be the only building left standing." His words were ragged but clear. Emma swallowed hard. The weight of responsibility fell on her shoulders heavier than the collapsing beams overhead. She looked at the wounded covering the floor, the smoke creeping through vents, the ceiling tiles beginning to drop in chunks. Her instinct screamed to flee, but there was nowhere to go. Every path outside led into fire. Vehicles burning, ammunition exploding in chains like a deadly drumbeat, artillery still raining with precise cruelty. There would be no safe retreat. Not now. Emma made her choice, her voice steady as she commanded Jackson to help move the severely wounded to the basement. The storage room reinforced with concrete. Maybe it would hold against the inferno. Jackson hesitated. "What about evacuation? Shouldn't we run?" Emma's gaze fixed through shattered glass at the burning compound. "There is nowhere to run." She answered firmly. "We stay. We fight with bandages and willpower until rescue comes." Private Williams appeared, soot on his face, reporting that the East Wing roof was starting to collapse. Emma bit back despair. How many more upstairs? He answered 6 walking wounded and 3 stretcher cases. She set priorities in her mind like a surgeon mapping veins. Triage under fire. She had practiced it in drills. Never like this. Never with the very walls of her hospital turning into coffins. One by one, the injured were carried down into the basement. The air grew thicker with smoke. Emma's throat burned, but she pressed forward, moving, directing, binding wounds, whispering encouragement even when her own knees trembled. Outside, the bombardment showed no mercy. Yet inside the basement, a fragile pocket of survival flickered to life. Down below, she worked by flashlight, her hands stained with blood, treating shrapnel wounds, concussions, chest punctures, improvising with torn fabric and metal clamps scavenged from maintenance kits. Private Chun, with his head wrapped in bandages, muttered tactical questions despite his daze. Sergeant Martinez gasped with chest wounds that demanded surgery Emma had no tools for. Yet she pressed fingers into arteries, created makeshift drains, turned wrenches and tubing into lifelines. Above them, the artillery roared for another hour, every detonation sending vibrations through the floor. Dust rained down. Soldiers glanced upward in fear the ceiling might collapse. Emma did not allow panic. She kept her voice calm, steady. She became anchor and shield. By the time silence finally fell, Alpha Base was gone, reduced to craters, burning husks, and rubble glowing red in the dawn. In the basement bunker, Emma Carter had saved 18 lives, and in that moment she understood survival would not be measured by weapons or numbers, but by her refusal to let death have even one more soul. The silence after the bombardment was heavier than the noise itself. The soldiers in the basement sat in dim light, their ears still ringing, their eyes wide with shock. Above them, the base was burning, ammunition stores crackling and popping, flames devouring the buildings that once felt safe. Emma Carter knew that silence was never safety. Silence meant only that the enemy was preparing for the next phase. The basement had not been designed for patience. It was meant for supplies. Metal shelves lined with crates of bandages, fuel cans, ration boxes. But now it became a battlefield hospital. The concrete walls sealed them from falling debris, but not from the smell of smoke, which seeped through cracks and vents until every breath tasted of ash. Emma walked the line of wounded with her flashlight, studying faces, cataloging injuries, calculating who needed immediate attention and who could wait. Private Chun sat against the wall with his head swathed in bloody cloth, his eyes half open, yet still asking questions about defensive positions. Emma knelt beside him, checked his pupils, pressed 2 fingers to his pulse. She knew he was concussed, but alive. His stubborn focus on tactics, even in his state, reminded her of how soldiers tried to cling to duty when their bodies wanted to give out. She left him with a canteen of water and moved on. At the far end, Sergeant Martinez lay pale and sweating, his chest wound bubbling with every shallow breath. Emma felt dread press against her ribs. This injury needed a surgical suite. It needed proper clamps, suction, transfusion, none of which existed here. She whispered calm words as she used improvised tools. A maintenance tube turned into drainage. A bent wrench clamped as if it were surgical steel. Her hands moved steady, though her heart raced. The others required bandages, tourniquets, splints fashioned from scrap wood. Every patient demanded something, and Emma became everywhere at once, giving orders to the walking wounded, pressing gauze to open wounds, cutting away scorched uniforms, forcing herself not to think about the sounds above, the groan of collapsing beams, the occasional muffled explosion of fuel tanks igniting. Private Williams appeared from the stairwell, soot smeared across his cheek, his voice low with urgency. "Ma'am, the roof of the east wing is gone. Flames spreading fast, smoke thickening." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, knowing that if the smoke entered the basement vents fully, suffocation would finish what artillery could not. She ordered Williams to find ventilation shafts, to look for emergency exits, any path they could use if the air turned deadly. Corporal Jackson, his arm bandaged but still strong enough to help, carried crates of supplies down from the wrecked upper rooms. Every item became priceless: rolls of gauze, alcohol wipes, broken packs of morphine. Emma made an inventory with her eyes and mind, allocating what could be spared and what had to be rationed. Pain relief was precious. She gave half doses to stretch the supply. She apologized silently to each soldier who grimaced through agony. Hours dragged like days. Every minute Emma moved from patient to patient. Her flashlight beamed the only star in a dungeon of concrete and blood. Sweat stung her eyes, her lungs burned, but she forced herself to keep walking, keep touching, keep promising survival to men who looked ready to fade. Then came the rumble, faint at first, then louder. The ground vibrated again, though no shell fell this time. Emma stiffened, It was the sound of armored vehicles rolling. The enemy was not finished. They were advancing, searching, sweeping. Her stomach clenched with realization. If they found the bunker, the 18 lives she protected would be trapped prey. Torres, one of the steadier soldiers despite a leg wound, moved close to Emma. "Ma'am, the fire upstairs is spreading, smoke filling the stairwell. We have to move soon." Emma looked at the faces around her, pale eyes glistening in flashlight glow. Some barely conscious, some whispering prayers. The choice was cruel: stay and risk suffocation, or move through tunnels in a fire and possible capture. She gathered the wounded who could still stand, gave them orders to help carry the stretcher cases. Her voice never wavered. "We move together. No one left behind." The men listened, drawn by her certainty. In war, authority is not rank on paper, but the calm that others cling to when fear takes hold. And Emma radiated that calm, even as her hands shook from exhaustion. The movement began, stretcher by stretcher, the tunnels narrow and choking with dust, each step a battle. Emma walked at the front, guiding, her flashlight cutting through darkness. Every so often a cough echoed. Every so often a groan broke the silence. But they kept moving, for Emma had said they would live, and no soldier wanted to prove her wrong. At last, they reached the underground vehicle maintenance bunker, a cavernous chamber meant to shield armored transports. Here the air was thicker, but at least the walls stood strong. Emma ordered positions, set up her makeshift hospital again, laid out scavenged supplies on tool benches. Her patients were lowered onto stretchers between fuel drums and spare tires. It was not a hospital. It was survival painted with grease and oil. Emma paced again, distributing tasks. Torres checking supply crates. Williams searching emergency cabinets. Chun with his injured head, trying to coax life from the battered radio set. Emma herself stitched wounds with improvised sutures, monitored pulses, adjusted splints, all while the muffled sound of enemy armor rumbled above. When at last Chun whispered weakly that he had caught fragments of a signal, that Commander Hayes with a rescue team was trying to reach them, a flicker of hope lit the room. But the reality was cruel. It could be hours, maybe longer, and Emma knew hours were lifetimes here. She leaned against the wall for a moment, sweat streaking her dusty face, eyes closing for a heartbeat. She let herself feel the fear only in that breath. Then she straightened again, shoulders squared, for every eye in that bunker turned to her. Their lives balanced not only on her skill but on her will, and Emma Carter would not let that will break. The air inside the maintenance bunker was heavy. Smoke drifted in faint streams through the vents. Every breath tasted of metal and ash. Emma Carter knew they could not stay long. The enemy had rolled into the compound above, their armored tracks groaning like monsters across the ruins, their voices carried down faintly, foreign tones echoing with confidence. They were searching, hunting for survivors. Emma gathered the walking wounded and those who could still stand upright. Her words sharp but steady. "We are moving again. This bunker is only a temporary shelter. If the enemy finds us here, we'll be trapped. We use the tunnels. We carry each other. No one gets left behind." The soldiers nodded, fear in their eyes, but trust too. She had saved them through fire already. They would follow her again into the dark. The tunnels were narrow, concrete arteries of the base, originally designed for fuel lines and maintenance passage, never for human convoys of wounded men. The ceilings low, pipes running overhead, the ground littered with dust and rubble shaken loose by bombardment. Emma led with her flashlight. Torres and Williams followed, carrying stretchers. Chun staggered at the rear, clutching the radio like a lifeline despite his dazed mind. Each step was agony for those carrying weight. Every stretcher jolted the wounded who groaned but did not protest. They all knew silence mattered. Above them, enemy boots scraped the ground. Vehicle engines revved. The clang of metal doors being forced echoed through the ruins. The hunters were close. One cough or one cry might bring them down. Emma clenched her jaw and whispered only with her eyes, "Move, steady, survive." The tunnels twisted and branched, some filled with smoke, others blocked by fallen beams. Emma paused at each fork, her instincts guiding her like a compass. She remembered the map of the base in fragments, recalled briefings and corridors glimpsed during calm days. Those memories now became a guide through choking labyrinth. She forced her mind to stay clear, for one wrong turn could end them all. After half an hour, the air grew hotter, the heat of fires above bleeding into the earth. Sweat ran down her back. Her arms ached from supporting a stretcher corner, but she pushed on, whispering encouragement to men whose faces gleamed with pain and exhaustion. Martinez moaned softly with his chest wound. Emma bent over him mid-step, adjusted his breathing tube, improvised from plastic piping, checked his pulse, forced herself to believe he could last longer. At one section, the tunnel narrowed so sharply that stretchers could not fit. Emma ordered the wounded to be lifted sideways, scraping shoulders against concrete. One soldier cried out as his arm twisted against his bandage. Emma pressed her palm over his mouth gently, tears in her eyes, as she whispered quiet not for silence, but for survival. They moved inch by inch until at last the passage widened again. The darkness played tricks. Some men muttered about hearing footsteps behind them. Others imagined voices. Emma forced them to focus. Keep moving, keep breathing. Every step a heartbeat closer to life. At last they reached another maintenance chamber, larger, with vents leading upward, shafts of dim light filtering through cracks above. Emma halted the group, let them rest for a moment, distributed canteens, her hands shaking as she poured sips of water into cracked lips. She listened carefully, the rumble of engines still above, gunfire distant but not gone. The base was occupied now, enemy forces combing through ashes. Chun stirred at the edge, his eyes glassy yet determined. "Ma'am, I caught fragments again. Commander Hayes still advancing. Artillery slowing him. Hours away still." Emma pressed a hand on his shoulder. "Good work, soldier. Keep trying. Every signal counts." She prayed silently he could hold consciousness long enough to establish full contact. Then the smoke grew thicker, rolling through vents in choking waves. The fires consuming Alpha Base were feeding the tunnels. Emma knew waiting here meant suffocation. She pointed toward the far shaft leading deeper. "This way, we head for the vehicle service bunker further west. It is larger, it may have air, and maybe we can hold until rescue." The movement resumed, stretchers swaying, men stumbling but refusing to quit. Emma's heart thundered with every sound above, boots scraping metal stairwells, doors slamming, voices shouting in foreign commands. She knew the enemy was sweeping building by building, and soon they would discover tunnels. After nearly 45 minutes of agonizing progress, they reached the western bunker, a cavernous chamber once used to house armor carriers. It smelled of oil and rust, but the air was clearer. Emma exhaled relief and ordered the men to set down the stretchers. Again she transformed steel benches and tool chests into medical tables. Again her hands returned to stitching, binding, adjusting, keeping life where death prowled. The soldiers followed her lead, Torres limping, yet helping distribute bandages. Williams searching every crate for usable supplies. Chun weak but still tapping the radio dials, whispering in a static like a man talking to angels. The bunker echoed with groans and clinks, the sound of a medical station born from rubble. Above, the engines shifted. Emma froze when she heard the metallic clatter of tracks closer than before, a grinding stop directly overhead, voices barking, foreign syllables, boots hammering against steel. She realized the enemy was now combing this sector. They were too close. She whispered to Torres, "What weapons do we have?" His reply grim. "For rifles, a handful of pistols, almost no ammunition. Not enough for defense." Emma's gaze swept over her patients. 18 lives that could not fight. 18 souls that would die if discovered. She swallowed dread and steadied herself. The hours stretched like blades. Above them, the enemy combed the ruins. Metal doors slammed. Shouts grew nearer. The bunker shook with footsteps as if fate itself walked above. Emma worked still, checking pulses, giving water, whispering courage, though her mind calculated terrible choices. If discovered, they had no chance, but surrender might keep her soldier alive. When footsteps at last echoed on the stairwell leading down, silence filled the bunker. Every soldier held breath. Rifles raised though hands shook. Emma stepped to the front, placing herself between the door and her patients. Her chest heaved, but her voice remained calm in her heart. If they come, I face them. If they take me, then at least the others might live. The metal door creaked, boots descending, voices sharp and unfamiliar. And Emma Carter braced herself, knowing the next moment would decide whether 18 wounded men saw another dawn. The stairwell trembled under the weight of boots. Shadows stretched across the bunker entrance. Then the door slammed open. 3 enemy soldiers burst inside with rifles raised, their eyes sharp and scanning. They halted when they saw Emma Carter standing in the middle of the bunker, her arms raised slightly, her frame blocking the sight of the wounded behind her. The soldiers barked words in their own tongue, harsh and clipped. Then one switched to broken English, American doctor, his voice uncertain but threatening. Emma drew in a breath. Steadying herself, she spoke with calm strength. I am Lieutenant Emma Carter, medical officer. These are wounded soldiers under my care. The men's eyes flicked around the bunker, taking in the makeshift bandages, the pale faces, the smell of blood mixed with oil. They muttered to one another before their leader pointed at Emma and barked. You come with us. Soldiers stay here. Emma felt her stomach knot. Leaving meant abandoning them. But refusing meant risking their execution. One enemy soldier pressed his rifle toward a wounded man, his meaning clear. If you refuse, they die. Emma's heart pounded as she made the choice no training had prepared her for. She would go. She would give herself to buy them time. She asked for a moment to stabilize her most critical patients. 5 minutes, she said firmly. They allowed it. Rifles still raised. She rushed to Torres and Williams, whispered fast instructions. Keep everyone alive until rescue comes. Hayes is still out there. Do not let them lose hope. She pressed extra morphine into Martinez's arm, adjusted Chen's bandage, gave Torres authority to lead if she did not return, her voice low and fierce. You are in charge until they come. Take care of our people. Torres tried to protest. What if they kill you? She cut him off with a whisper. Then you lead. And she rose before her patients, ready to walk into captivity. The soldiers escorted her through the burning skeleton of Alpha Base. Daylight now revealed the devastation in full. Every building shattered or aflame. Smoke plumes climbing like funeral pyres. Twisted vehicles scattered across the compound. Ammunition stores still erupting in sporadic bursts. Emma's boots crunched over glass and ash, her lungs filled with acrid smoke. She held her head high despite her fear, refusing to let her captors see weakness. They brought her to a surviving structure, a shell of concrete where the enemy had established a command post. Inside stood Major Krovic, a stern officer whose English was smoother than his soldiers, his eyes cold as he studied Emma. Lieutenant Carter, you will treat our wounded. Emma stood tall. I will treat all who are wounded, but my soldiers in the bunker need care. They cannot wait. The major dismissed her words. Your soldiers are prisoners now. They will wait. Ours first. The next hours bled together. Emma bent over stretchers filled with enemy casualties, shrapnel wounds, burns, fractures. She worked with steady hands though her heart screamed for the men she had left behind. Her medical oath bound her. She treated pain, stitched gashes, improvised solutions with enemy tools. Every time she pressed gauze to a wound, she thought of her own comrades gasping in darkness without her. But she did not falter. She kept moving. Time blurred until at last the low thunder of helicopter blades rippled through the smoke-filled sky. Emma's head jerked upward. Hope flared. American aircraft, rescue forces drawing near. Major Krovic's lips curled into a thin smile. Now we negotiate, he said, and Emma realized her comrade's survival was about to become bargaining chips. Commander Robert Hayes had arrived, establishing a perimeter with his rescue team. His voice crackled through enemy radios. We are here for our people. Release them. The standoff began. Emma was held between the sides, forced to continue treating enemy wounded as hours passed. Her body exhausted, but her mind focused. She knew the bunker would be running out of time. Martinez with his chest wound, Williams feverish with infection, Chen slipping in and out of consciousness. Every moment away was another life closer to ending. Emma tried again. Major, I must see my soldiers. They will die without me. The major shook his head. You remain here until negotiations end. Emma bit her lip until it bled, fury and despair surging. But she steadied herself once more, for anger would not save them. Only patience and resolve. At last a compromise formed. Hayes offered a prisoner exchange. Enemy wounded would receive treatment by their own doctors. Emma would be allowed to return to her bunker. Medical care given on both sides. The major considered, weighed his options, and finally agreed. Emma was escorted back through the ruins, smoke swirling, flames still burning after so many hours. She descended into the bunker again, and the sight nearly crushed her. Her patients lay pale and trembling, sweat-soaked, breathing ragged. Torres rushed to her, relief flooding his tired eyes. "We held on, ma'am. But Martinez is failing." Chun collapsed, Williams' fever rising. Emma fell to her knees beside them, hands flying, heart breaking. "I am here, hold on. I am here." She worked with renewed ferocity, stitching again, forcing fluids into parched veins, improvising antibiotics from salvage supplies, whispering courage into ears that could barely hear. She poured every ounce of her will into those men, knowing that outside the standoff still raged, that rescue hung by a thread. Yet here underground life and death hung on her hands alone. Hours passed, hours of pain and hope interwoven, until word came at last, negotiations complete, exchange arranged, evacuation ready. Emma sagged with relief, but did not stop working. She kept her soldiers breathing, kept them alive until the blades of rescue helicopters thumped above like a promise of salvation. The sound of the helicopters above the ruins of Alpha Base was like thunder rolling from the heavens. For the men in the bunker, it was salvation wrapped in steel wings. For Emma Carter, it was the moment she had been fighting toward since the first missile struck in the pre-dawn hours. Commander Robert Hayes had secured the perimeter. Negotiations with the enemy dragged on for hours. Yet now at last the agreement was struck. Emma gathered her patience, her voice steady though her body trembled with fatigue. "Hold on. Just a little longer." The wounded were prepared for evacuation, stretchers aligned, walking wounded supporting each other, Torres with his leg wound, leaning on Williams despite his fever, Chun barely conscious but clutching the radio still as though it were part of him. Every man bore scars of fire and collapse, yet every man still breathed. The prisoner exchange was tense. Enemy forces marched their own wounded toward the Americans, while Emma's soldiers were carried out one by one, helicopters lowering with blades whipping ash and smoke into swirling clouds. Emma stayed close to Martinez, still fighting his chest wound. Pressing her hand over bandages as if her touch alone kept him alive, she whispered to him with every step, "We are leaving. You are not dying here." When the first stretchers reached the helicopters, Emma finally allowed herself to breathe. The medics from Hayes' team rushed forward, their faces set with grim determination. They took the patients with practiced precision, lifting, strapping, securing. Emma moved with them, refusing to leave until the last soldier was loaded, refusing to rest while one life remained under her care. Hayes stepped into the smoke to meet her, his uniform blackened with soot, his voice rough but filled with relief. "Lieutenant, what you have done here is beyond extraordinary. You saved them all." Emma shook her head, sweat dripping from her temple. "I only did what had to be done." He gripped her shoulder firmly. "Not everyone could have. Remember that." The helicopters roared skyward, rising above the devastation. Emma looked down at the ruins of Alpha Base, a graveyard of concrete and fire, every building torn apart, the ground littered with wreckage. She knew the memory would never fade. The sound of the missiles, the screams, the endless hours of blood and ash. It would live in her bones forever, but she also knew 18 soldiers had survived because she refused to surrender. The flight to the field hospital took 2 hours. Emma did not sit once. She moved between stretchers, checking vitals, adjusting bandages, whispering courage into fading ears. She pressed water to lips. She steadied trembling hands. She kept Martinez breathing with every ounce of her skill and will. When they landed at last, and the hospital teams rushed forward, she stayed close, handing over reports, explaining every injury, guiding the surgeons to what mattered first. Only when the last of her soldiers was wheeled away did she stumble, exhaustion dragging her down. His caught her arm, guiding her to a cot. "Rest, Lieutenant. You have earned it." She closed her eyes, the roar of helicopters still echoing in her mind. But this time it was no longer the sound of war. It was the sound of survival. Weeks passed, then months. The story of Alpha Base spread through the ranks, a tale of a medic who held 18 lives against fire, collapse, and capture. Emma Carter was promoted to captain, awarded the Silver Star, though she insisted it belonged to every man who fought to carry a comrade. Every soldier who refused to give up, her name became a lesson. Her methods of improvisation studied by military medical schools across the world. Yet Emma herself never thought of medals or lectures. She thought of faces, of Martinez who lived despite the odds, of Chun who recovered from his concussion and joked that the radio saved him more than his helmet, of Williams who survived infection and limped with pride, of Torres who still called her man with respect in his eyes. 18 lives had gone home to families because she never let go. That was the only reward she cared for. Years later, when she stood before new recruits, now promoted further, her hair streaked with gray, she told them not of glory or rank, but of will. She said the battlefield will strip you of tools, of comfort, of hope, but you must never let it strip you of determination when the world falls apart around you. When smoke chokes your lungs and rubble cages your patience, you do not quit. You keep your hands steady. You keep hearts beating, for that is what it means to be a medic. Emma Carter's story became more than history. It became a reminder that in war the strongest weapon is not steel or firepower. It is the human spirit refusing to yield. Alpha Base had been destroyed, but 18 men lived to tell their children of the medic who carried them through the fire. And so the legacy of that night endures, a testament carved not into stone monuments, but into the breath of every soldier who survived, proof that sometimes the greatest victories are born not from battle won, but from lives preserved. Emma Carter did not just save 18 men. She taught the world that courage and service of life can burn brighter than any inferno, and that a single medic can stand against the tide of death and prevail.